So, welcome back to another episode. I'm really looking forward to our guest today. Her name is Jacqui Zakar, um, out of Perth, Australia, which is crazy. We're doing this at 6 p.m. her time, 6 a.m. my time. So we're really working overtime to get you guys some awesome conversations. And just like behind the scenes, we were chopping it up, talking about what like the origin of the podcast was for some of you people that are joining us for the first time. I told Jacqui, kind of in an age of abundant information, right? Like we all have Chat GPT and Google at our fingertips to learn, what's the best way to deal with X, right? We've all typed that in. Food aggression, resource guarding, how do you get a dog to walk nicely on a leash, all that stuff. It's not that we need more knowledge. We need more wisdom. And that's why I named the podcast Doggie Stoic, because what I want listeners and really selfishly myself to kind of learn is, how and why and when we should apply those things. So without further ado, Jacqui from Dog Sense in Australia, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
So look, we could start. I typically do start with the origin story, but with you, I wanted to start a little bit differently because from what I've seen, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, you've been kind of like on a staunch advocate of having more conversations between the force-free community and the balanced community. And this is coming from Australia. So, and I wanted to learn a little more kind of like what you're seeing there and why you became so passionate about that mission of having more communication between the sides. And then we'll get into, your own journey, how you became a dog trainer and things like that. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And just to say, I love the theme and the vibe you've got behind this podcast, because I think outside of dog training and the industry stuff and everything, I actually am quite interested in debate and critical ways of thinking and kind of theories around that as well. Because I find people interesting. I'm not necessarily a big people person, but I actually find people interesting and how they view the world and the lenses they look at things through and where they've come to that place. So it's kind of like that little bit of a philosophical side to where we are in the dog training industry as well. So I kind of like that there's that edge to it. And because we all do have our kind of separate journeys. I mean, yeah, I'm in Perth, Australia, so we are literally the most isolated city on the planet in terms of the next city is a 4.5-hour flight away from us, the next major city anyway. But I'm from New Zealand originally. And I guess when I first got started in dog training when I was a bit older, like I'm in my early 50s now, I started dog training in my early 40s. So I'd lived a lot of life and worked in a lot of industries and got an education and everything. So I kind of looked at things a little differently to probably a lot of new dog trainers do. And at the time I thought, everybody just trains. It is what it is. But I think over the years, because I am very interested in what everybody else is doing and why they're doing it that way, I can certainly see that I think Australia is a little bit different to the States, to a little bit different to the UK, to Europe and other places. And I actually find that really interesting. And I have a lot of trainer friends in the States, and we chat often, like daily, sometimes with some of my closer friends, sharing like experiences and what we see and everything. And again, I really see that I think we've got it a little bit lucky here in Australia, because I think, I don't know, I wouldn't say the divide isn't the same. I just think, I don't even really know how to explain it. I almost feel like there's a slightly different standard that when I see some of the stuff in the States, sometimes I'm like, oh, what's going on with that? But then again, it's almost like you have these categories which are more extreme. Whereas I feel like in Australia, it's a little bit more like this. It's not quite so extreme at these ends. Does that make sense? So I found
Americans are extreme beings. I mean, you see our fast food industry where we are very extreme. We used to have a Super Size Me. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That movie.
I've been to the States many times. So It was eye-opening when I've spent time in LA. Like what you get at restaurants and stuff there, I'm like, this is massive. Like,
so I grew up playing.
Loud. Yeah.
I grew up playing soccer, so I had a lot of
Oh,
international friends. I did.
Wow.
I actually have a friend in Australia. I think Melbourne. But
Okay.
they would always say, guys, your portions, like, what is a big gulp? Like, how do you guys drink that much soda? I think it's 64 ounces of in one of those like styrofoam cups. So America is an extreme country. Let me ask you, the internet said you got a psychology degree, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, your curiosity dates back to you just going to university? I mean, if you're getting a psychology degree out of university, you're curious in how human beings think, how humans make decisions. I don't even want to say humans, how human nature and how our universe and all that, how decisions are made and why they're made. So you've been interested in that, it seems like, much longer even than you were at dog training. That's been a consistent theme in your life.
Yeah. I graduated Psych many years before I even considered getting into dog training. And it's not even so, it is the Psych degree, because I think you can't say that certain education doesn't affect you. Obviously it does. It makes you see the world in a different way. But I did that late as well. I was a bit of a, renegade teenager. I moved to a different country when I was 15, and I moved to Melbourne, actually, from New Zealand. Then I moved to Perth. I've moved to London. Like, I've been all over the place. So when I went into university, it was kind of like, I need to get my shit together. And how old was I? 22, 23, which is a little bit older for university. It wasn't going from high school. And I kind of did it part-time, off and on, and eventually graduated. But I had that experience of feeling like I didn't know much because I left school early, because I had to do what we call mature age university entrance here, had to do night classes and stuff. So I kind of already had that experience. I don't want to say seeming dumb, but feeling like I wasn't knowledgeable about anything in particular. And I've always kind of wanted to know stuff about stuff, but I've never wanted to assume and jump on a bandwagon. I want to kind of find out for myself. So I think then when I did psychology, it kind of gave me the tools in a way to research things and understand things in different ways. But then kind of I've worked in mental health and I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry as well. So all of those experiences have helped me see different industries with science and how people have conversations and how industries are seen. So by the time I got to dog training, it was like, whoa, this is a different lens. Like, this is different. And for a lot of people, it's really disheartening, I think, when you get into this industry and you realize that it's not like playing with fluffy dogs and everybody just talks about dogs because we all love dogs. It's just not like that. I wish it was, but it's just not like that. And I think a lot of trainers get burnt out really quick, especially when they're young, because it's so disheartening and you realize there's so much judgment. But as much as I find that frustrating, I also find it really fascinating as well, that dog trainers seem quite unique. If anything, you see a lot of extremes and personalities, or is it the industry that pulls those things out of people? Like, it's a passionate topic, but it's the ideologies and everything. So I actually find it quite fascinating. And I love having discussions with people I don't agree with. It's just difficult to have those discussions without it getting really toxic. And I know I'm not always like completely professional in some of my conversations, but I never try and go as low as some people do. And I wish there was more opportunities to have discussions with different points of views so we could really hash out evidence. So I'm interested in debate and things like that. It's just really difficult to have, I think, in our industry.
When you hear the word science, how would you define the word science? Because there's so often you hear like science says, and then it's ... How would you define, like, if someone's listening, and we heard science since COVID started. Science, the science.
Yeah, and that was eye-opening for me as well, because I came from the pharmaceutical industry when I started dog training. So I have a different view as a lot of people might. So I find that very interesting as well. But science, I think, when people will define it however they want because it suits them. Either they like throw it out because it's rubbish and it can't measure everything, or if science says this, this is the way it is, and it says something. But really, science doesn't say anything. It's really just an advanced measurement tool when you think about it. It's a way of checking and weeding out noise and checking, is this having an effect? Is this having an effect? Is it this thing? Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Is it this thing, and getting rid of all the other variables to reduce the noise until you've got like, we're pretty much sure that this causes this, but let's test it in lots of different ways. So to me, I mean, you can define it differently. To me, it's a measurement tool. It's just a way of testing ideas until you start to see patterns. And behavioral science it's not like the hard sciences, because there's so many variables. So you can never really say science says this in behavioral science and it's an absolute, because there are always so many variables that you can just never test, but everybody wants to use it that way, so that's quite frustrating.
One of the force-free lines that they use is pain, discomfort, and pressure. They always loop these words in. They do a really good job of like doing like the extreme word and then like a kind of like a moderate word together to kind of like, so it'd be like pain, discomfort, and then pressure, right? Like it's pain, discomfort, pressure, called stress in the dog, right? That's a big one.
You mean fear, pain, intimidation?
Fear, pain, intimidation.
That's what they usually say. Yeah.
Causes stress in the dog, right? That's how they word it. Mm-hmm. But then you could also say like not giving your dog little bits of stress causes them to be weak when they're older. Mm-hmm. And that leads to many behavioral problems. Mm-hmm. How do you, because you love, I mean, you guys see Jacqui, she's the nicest lady ever. I mean, you see that. But on the internet, she likes
how I come across online.
She loves a good debate. What do you say back to the force-free community? I mean, we could say Zach George. We could bring him up because he has maybe one of the bigger followings. What do you say back to them? Like if they were on this show, and really genuinely they wanted to have a conversation, how would you reply to that?
And you know what? I would love to have that opportunity. It's just really difficult to have this kind of interaction. Like you sure as hell aren't going to have it with Zach George because he wouldn't put himself in this position. There are some force-free trainers I know I've actually spoken to, and they said that they would like to have this conversation. I'm hoping that I can do that in the next few months with somebody who's got a master's in psychology, I think, and all the accreditations in force-free, but they're actually quite an extremist. So I think that would be an interesting conversation. Because
what are some of their views? When you say they're an extremist, what are some of
all the same stuff that I mean, I don't know how much detail you know about how research and stuff gets cherry picked, but basically they'll take a study about an e-collar or a position statement and they'll make claims which just aren't true. And I think the thing with it is I think there's a certain level of understanding of the training methods that they're talking about. You have to have before you look at a research paper and say, well, is that measuring what trainers are doing? Like, because the reality is that there's almost zero research that is really measuring what you and I would do or what general trainers would do at all. But there's a bunch of incompetent use of tools and methods and stuff like that, which show stress and, conditioned handler avoidance and that kind of stuff. So I think if you don't understand the methods that trainers are using, and then you see that research, and there's a lot of it, and then there's a lot of blogs about that research, and there's a lot of blogs about the blogs, and it just gets, thrown all over the place. I understand why people would come to those conclusions. If you use ChatGPT and ask them about should positive reinforcement training be the only training used, ChatGPT is going to tell you, hell yeah, because this is bad and this is bad. So of course people understand that. So in a way, it makes it easy. And when I say force-free, I'm talking about more the extreme end. Like I respect positive reinforcement trainers, force-free trainers. I learn from many of them. So I'm really talking about that extreme end, down the Zach George end of the spectrum. The problem is they are not interested in seeing what we really do day to day. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, it's because of this, because of that. the reality is I don't really know. I think even if they're not conscious of it, people like Zach George don't want to see, because they actually have an inkling that if they did see something that isn't so bad, they would have to admit it. And that would just open Pandora's box and their house of cards falls down, because it's that sunk cost fallacy. They can't go, well, actually, that's not that bad, because their entire ideology is based on it being terrible. So it's very easy for them to use emotive terminology when they're talking about science, and they're the ones claiming to be science-based trainers. But when you talk about training methods, they'll say, well, there's no need for pain, fear, and intimidation in dog training because the ABSAB says so. And I'm like, which quadrant is pain and fear? And they'll be like, oh, when you use punishment. And I'm like, so you're telling me that Skinner defined positive punishment as painful and fearful? And because he didn't, and no behaviorists did, because that's not a definition of learning. Like, fear isn't part of punishment. Pain isn't part of punishment. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be, but it doesn't mean it has to be either. But it sounds much better if we present it like that. So the funny thing is, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, balanced trainers that often do use the correct terminology, the correct technical terminology, but the science-based trainers don't, because that doesn't get that emotive response, So in a conversation like that, if that is presented to me, I would, and I think that's one of the main things I would try and do in a conversation like that, is really make sure that we are defining the terms we talk about. If they say aversives do this, I want to know, what do you mean by aversive? Like, are you talking about when it's cold and it feels a bit uncomfortable, so you put a jumper on? That kind of aversive? Because that's aversive. That's negative reinforcement. You know what I mean? Or are we talking about, I punch you in the face if you do something I don't like? Because it's, what are you defining? Like, you can condition a shock as a secondary positive reinforcer. Like, it doesn't have to be pain or fear. It doesn't really have to be something you love. It's what's the effect it has on behavior. It's just so much easier for them to reduce it to this kind of one-dimensional kind of view of things. So I think having conversations like that, everybody wants to jump to their argument. Whereas I think if people just defined what we're talking about at the outset and just ask, what do you mean by that exactly? Give me an example. Because if they go, well, dogs get stressed out and shut down because an e-collar is painful and it causes fear. And I'm like, so does that mean if I can show you an observable like training session with a dog and you see zero fear, zero pain, does that mean that you would question what you've just presented? Well, no, because that's, you know what I mean? And then it goes down a rabbit hole. So I'm like, well, let's define what we're talking about first and foremost. And then it's just rabbit holes from there. It's very, very difficult to have a conversation where you stay on topic, because it always goes off into all these different areas. So I think any conversation needs to come back to, let's just decide what we are talking about. This is an example, and let's move forward. Because I think that would halt a lot of conversations right there, and they'd kind of not know where to go from there.
For most people I know, like whether it's online or in person or dog owners, there's two real use cases for the e-collar. One is stopping behaviors and the other is negative reinforcement, right? So stopping behaviors is like danger. I put them in three buckets: dangerous, destructive, or rude. That would be like a stopping a behavior. But then there's also, your dog is, you're from New Zealand. Let's say you have a livestock guardian dog, right? Let's say you have a dog I'm assuming there's a lot of land, there's a lot of property, and at times they could be a danger towards other wildlife, right?
Oh, sure.
Whether that's you don't want them to go attack something or you don't want something to attack it. Just basic recall using the e-collar, I feel like that's a pretty fair use case for it.
You would think.
well, it brings me to the next question, because I asked that question, and then I went to a lot of force-free trainers' pages. I never see their dogs off leash.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing.
Wouldn't that beg the question? Like, dogs want to be off leash. I think it's really hard to argue that. I don't know a dog who doesn't like freedom. Right? Freedom to me is the biggest reward. So in my training, I'm obviously we all evolve as trainers, and we try to improve and learn new methods, and we go to seminars. I'll ask you about the Canine conference that was just this past
Whoa.
weekend and how that went. So everyone's like, I mean, 99% of people I know try to improve almost every day. They love this space. They love dogs. They want to get better. But like, so like to me, freedom is the number one positive reinforcement for dogs. To be able to run in nature, whether that's play with you, play with your friends, chase something, just run in circles. Is that fair to say like freedom is like the number one reinforcer for dogs, and not giving dogs the opportunity? To me, that's pain, fear, and intimidation all wrapped into one.
Yeah. And the thing is, I have so many arguments online with people, which is a bit of a weakness that's almost become a bit of a strength, because I've learned so much. Like, it's like I've got an algorithm on my head. If I was having this conversation in comments, I know exactly what they would say. I know exactly what
Let's go. And don't be nice. Don't be nice.
No, they would say, and I'm talking about if they've been reasonably pleasant and they're not telling me and I'm an abuser and that kind of stuff. But what they would say to that is not at the expense of your dog being shut down and fearful of getting zapped. That's what they would say to that. And if you have to have an e-collar on and your finger on the button, is that really freedom? And it comes back to, you don't understand how we train these things and how that training goes through building blocks, because a lot of the force-free extremists think it's either positive reinforcement or punishment. And so many conversations go with that. It's like, I'll talk about, well, the research says this, and that's not really true. And they'll be like, well, you can use your punishment and you can use your e-collar, but maybe you should learn more about differential reinforcement and counter conditioning. And I'm like, how about that I know all of that and use it, and maybe not to everybody's standard, but to a general standard of most R+ trainers, and then I've got something else just in case. And I think a lot of the more extremists, just don't believe it. They just don't believe you could have that skill set, because if you did, you wouldn't use pain, fear, and intimidation. But like you say, all these arguments, and they all go through these flow charts, these arguments, and they always come out the same place. And I see this all the time. And sometimes I'll either say, and sometimes if I want to speed it up, I'll say, look, let's stick to the topic and not start to personally attack anyone. But we're going to get to the point where you're going to make claims, I'm going to make claims, and then I'm going to say, show me, and you're not going to be able to. And I know exactly what they say to that normally. It's not my job to show you what's out there. See for yourself. And I'm like, send me a link. I don't have time for that. I've got dogs to train. And I'm like, if I had that evidence, if you asked me that, I'd be like, hell yeah, what's your email? I'll send you 20 links, because I would really like you to see that. And sometimes I do that. I tag people in comments and stuff, and they're like, I don't have time for this ridiculous conversation. You need to educate yourself. Block. Because it gets to the point where, and look, we both know that a lot of R+ trainers, or maybe we don't all know, but a lot of R+ trainers can get to quite decent levels of training. Some dogs never need e-collars or aversive control to be off leash. But the population of those dogs is way smaller than you can with balanced training. But their argument is always going to come back to, well, I'm not going to shock my dog into being off leash. And often they'll say things like if you have to have an e-collar on your dog, is your dog really trained? And I'm like, hey, check out my dog, no e-collar. And they're like, oh, well, and I'm like, but that's what training is. Remember training, how we have processes and we're meant to phase things out and all that kind of stuff. They think it's the dog's anticipating a shock. And I'm like, a lot of my clients, not that I do a lot of e-collar training, but when I do e-collar training, we're doing maybe 2 or 3 punishments at some point, and the rest of it is we're having a blast. And then there's no e-collar. There's always those dogs that do wear the e-collar, and a lot of clients feel more comfortable having it there, and I totally get that. But the thing is, we're arguing about topics where we don't understand the fundamentals of what we're arguing about. But like I said before, I think those more extreme trainers don't want to see. They don't want to look at your videos, because they're afraid if they see something, they're not going to be able to argue against that. And it's a slippery slope. Like, lots of people say to me, you're abusive because you use this, you shouldn't be allowed to train dogs. And I'm like, could you just have a look through some of my training videos and tell me which dogs I've used aversive methods with and which I haven't? They're like, oh, I'm not going to go and look at your videos. And I'm like, well, why are you arguing with me if you have no interest in understanding my side of the argument? You just want to tell me your argument, but you don't actually want to learn the broader argument. You just want to tell me because you think I'm the one that needs to be educated. So that's what I find very frustrating.
If you need an e-collar on your dog, is your dog really trained? It's a reasonable question. It got me thinking. If you have a leash on your dog, if you need a leash on your dog, is your dog really trained? I mean, it's a fair question,
isn't it?
If you need treats in your hand, is your dog really trained?
Exactly.
If you need to bring a toy with you, is your dog? I mean, it's a legit question. Jacqui,
and to that, we're going to say, well, a toy and treats isn't making a dog feel terrified of their handler.
Being fat is one of the worst things in life.
I know, but well, they'll say, well, I don't know, I'd rather be fat than shocked. Like I've heard them all. And then when you push back on that, they'll be like, you really need to read the AVSB's position statement and every vet association in the world. Like, what makes you think you know more than them? I'm like, because I'm using these methods and I'm a trainer. They're not.
We need to have a conversation about vets in the sense that I don't think people realize vets are businesses. Sure. I think they think vets are just like goodwill human beings. Like vets are businesses. Like if you actually kind of like watch so you have the puppy, and the first business that they have is shots, right? So they're selling you shots for your puppy, right? Then they'll say, here, you need a booster. And then they'll often say, hey, we have this great science-based food you could buy from us. Oh, and then you have heartworm that you can buy from us, right? And a lot of these, you need a vet prescription to get them. Like you can't just go buy some of these things. I think heartworm, don't quote me on it. And then it's spay and neuter, right? So like oftentimes you laugh, but like vets are a business model too. They want consistent revenue.
This is where I think, and I don't know for sure, but this is where I think it's one of those areas where Australia and the States differs a little bit.
Share, please.
And I know this from another angle is working in pharmaceuticals as well, right. Because when I was a product specialist, I would speak to, I mean, if I was a veterinary product specialist, I'd be speaking to vets. But in my case, I spoke to doctors and surgeons and stuff like that, educating them on the medications or devices. So I kind of know the regulations and what reps can and can't do in Australia versus America. And in America, there's a lot more of that, whereas Australia's kind of reined that in a little bit, like 20 years ago or so and I think America's always been a bit different, but there were incentives in terms of, not, I think, I don't know
plus incentives.
They get monetary incentives, but they never have here. And I think that, I don't think they do in the States anymore. I do think it's pushed a little bit that they do, but there's actually not a lot of truth to that. But you do get kickbacks and sponsorships in terms of product or whatever. Here, when I started pharmaceuticals, unless the medication that I was educating doctors on was off what we call PBS, which is like on our pharmaceutical scheme. So you could buy it over the counter at a pharmacy. So if you could buy it over the counter, I could give a doctor a pen with the name of it on. But if it was prescription only, I could not give them anything, as an incentive. All I could do was bring them lunch, and that lunch had to be, in terms of cost per doctor, within reason, because just for that reason that they wanted to pull back on manipulation and stuff like that. I think in the States it's a bit different. I think they have a little bit more liberty, because I know in the States with pharmaceuticals, you can advertise prescription drugs. You can't do that here. Like you can mention a company and talk about like getting your lifestyle back if you take Viagra or whatever it is, or not, but you can't say the product name. And then you might see like Pfizer in the bottom or something like that. Whereas in the States, they can talk about a drug and this is what it can do for you, and go to your doctor. So you can't do that here. So I know a lot of veterinary clinics and stuff get sponsored by Hills and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know that space as well. But I do know from my own experience with vets here that the belief that they are all in it for the money is actually quite upsetting for a lot of vets here. I'm sure there's the clinic owners and stuff, I'm sure is different. I'm not sure what the deal is in the States, but I know here there's a lot of vets that are like, we're actually just trying to help your pet. And we got into this for that reason. And
but it's
they
not
don't
all or
push
nothing.
those things. They don't, I mean, they push the vaccination, but they'll say to you, like, if you'd rather get a teeter test than a vaccination every year, you can do that. But the problem is the teeter test is more expensive than the vaccination. So it's all of those things. But
can I clarify that real quick? Just real quick, Jacqui. I don't think it's all or nothing. I think most vets want to get in it to help your pet.
Oh, for sure.
But I think there's also a monetary benefit of keeping dogs coming back to keep the lights on in the business. So I don't think it's one or the other.
That's the practice owners that might push that for sure. It's not my experience here. We don't really get that. If you're like, look, do I really have to get that? They're like, no, not really. I don't know if it's more evidence-based here that it's not, I don't get that impression here. Whereas I do think the States really is the biggest capitalist country in the world. So it makes sense that it's more about capital. But at the same time, and this is the same with I was having a conversation with my one of my trainer friends the other day. We were talking about, toxic people in the dog training business, and people who do this and they're extreme. What's wrong with dog trainers? And I said to them, I think it's like you get good and bad people, but I don't think it's fair to lump a trait or a way people behave to an industry or a profession, even if that profession needs kind of some upkeep, or they need what's the word I'm looking for? Reform. I think it's tough on the people that really are trying to do the right thing. And I'm a bit of an optimist, so I know. But because at the end of the day, vets have some of the highest suicide rates in any profession. Right? In Australia, they do, because it's just so rough, like with people wanting to euthanize their pets for no reason, people just dropping their pets off there, like the demands put on them. And even and I know it because I've lost 2 dogs in the last just under a year that have had to go to the vet, and a few years ago another one. We all had to go to the same emergency vet. And I often think, the times that I've been there when that's happened, I've thought they have to be compassionate to what you're experiencing there. Like, I've got my 12-year-old screaming in a vet room because her chihuahua just got killed in a tragic accident, and we're all devastated. For us, this is one of the hardest days, the hardest moments of our life. For them, that's daily, and they still have to gently go, can you just give us your details and stuff? Because if they were just like, look, it's not the right time, we'll get back to you later, imagine their business would go into the ground. So I think it's balances and benefits, and my experience with veterinary behaviorists and some vets here, and this was my experience in pharmaceuticals as well, they range vastly. Like, you assume that medical professionals know what they're doing, they know the procedures, they know the research. Some of the doctors I would speak to when I was a pharmaceutical rep, it was scary, like what some doctors were doing. When you would say, hey, doctor, this is best practice, and this shows this, and this is much safer because now we don't have these side effects. And they're like, oh, look, I've always done it that way. I'll do it that way. Or I don't even bother with that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing for the last 20 years. So people are people. But I think with the veterinary side of things, a lot of it is, I think they're good people in situations where the industry and the money-making machine almost forces them to do things they don't necessarily want to push with patients. And I think a lot of them are depressed because all they wanted to do was just help animals. And now they're in this corporate machine getting pressure from one side, pressure from the owners. So I have vet behaviorists I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with. With vets, I find most of them don't want to be in the position that they get painted into a lot of the time, and they actually find it quite hard, to be honest. But that's Australia.
Sure. let me just clarify exactly how I view it, because I love everything you said there, and maybe just like a thought exercise for people. So if anyone's sold a house in their life, they hire a real estate agent, right? And they often assume that them and the real estate agent have aligned incentives.
They have a what?
Aligned incentives.
Aligned incentives. Sorry,
Yes.
American accent. Can't understand what you're saying.
Aligned incentives. So they mostly do, but not entirely. So
Mhm.
your goal is to sell the house for the most amount of money.
Of course.
The real estate agent's goal is to sell the house for the most amount of money in the shortest period of time.
Yep.
So mostly aligned, but not entirely aligned.
Yeah.
And I would say that exact same thing applies to vets. Not that they're good or bad people, because humans, we
100%.
love that good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
Yeah.
It's our incentives aligned. And that's
Sure.
really important to think about. Anything you want to say on that before we move on?
Yeah, and I think you're right. And if anything, even if we slightly disagree on like how we see the veterinary industry, I think our perspective is actually the same, because I think we're both coming from a place of it's not black and white, but I think the situation you're in and the practices and the habits you're in do create a certain type of behavior, but then you have your good and bad people. Funnily enough, one of my bridesmaids, one of my best friends, is one of the most successful real estate agents in her firm. And I know for a fact she is one of the most ethical people, that she goes way beyond for her clients. And of course she wants to make money. She's a jet. But and again, maybe I'm biased because I've had a really positive experience, but I also hate the freaking real estate agents that leave flyers in my letterbox that says no junk mail, because they're all just wanting to get a sale. And sometimes I call them and say, I will never sell my house through you guys because you don't read the sign on my letterbox. What else?
Don't piss Jacqui off. I wouldn't mess with Jacqui.
It's one of my pet peeves that my husband brings one in and he shakes it, and I'm like, ah. But you're right. I mean, I've worked in a law firm. Like, you know, lawyers do some dodgy stuff sometimes behind the scenes. I think it draws certain characteristics out of some people, and it probably attracts certain people to the industry they're in. The problem is when we see the stereotypes about it, is it sucks for the people that are actually just really interested in the subject matter and just want to do a good job. So I think we both agree it's not black and white, but it's certainly, there are trends. You know, there are trends.
I want to hear about the client dogs that you've recently had, and kind of how you think about going from evaluation to training, whether you do board and trains, private lessons, kind of, you know, if someone's listening to this episode and, you know, I was just at a conference in person with Jack, Larry Crone, and Joel.
Wow.
It was incredible. I'm not a big seminar guy. This is only my second one. The first one I went to was Ivan's TWC. Was Dylan Jones's.
Kind of been spoiled, yeah.
Well, I don't want to go learn from bad people, honestly.
Fair enough.
I don't want. Yeah. So, but Jack was phenomenal. I didn't know much about Jay. He was the first episode I did on the show.
No, I listened to it. And whenever I hear Jack's stuff, because he's so good at explaining stuff. And every time I listen to a podcast or watch one of his videos, and I wish he put out more stuff. It's hard to find his stuff, and it's actually really annoying because I think he has such a gift. But whenever I listen to his stuff, I'm like, I've got to remember to explain it like that, because the way I explain it, it's all right, but oh my God, that's so much better. I literally took notes when I was listening to the podcast with Jack, because I'm like, that's right. That's how he explains it.
He makes it easy and digestible. So what are typically people coming to you? What kind of issues are they coming to you with?
I guess I get the general issues, a lot of leash reactivity, you know, hypersocial dogs that have been socialized at dog parks, and manners, and all the general stuff, some aggression, some serious stuff. I'm not actually a big fan of doing serious human aggression, to be honest. I don't know. It's just not my jam. I know it is for a lot of trainers because it's a bit of a status thing. I'm really not that interested in that. I'm actually naturally a bit of a jumpy person, and I don't think that's good for working with serious human aggression, even though I'm not bad. I actually really like doing the stuff where it's really about how you live with your dog is going to be how they live with you, like the general lifestyle rules and boundaries, and understanding like the most basic stuff like threshold training, where you just show a client a threshold training and you just see them go, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'm like, look, we're just going to apply that principle to everything. That really basic stuff. I don't need to do all the dramatic stuff to feel validated, because I know there's other trainers that are just very good at that, and I'm just not as good at it. I can do it. I just think it's not my passion, so I'm probably never going to be as good. But a lot of leash stuff and everything. So your bread and butter kind of suburban training. I guess I'm in an interesting space because I want to specialize in tailoring methods, because if there's one thing I have done, it's learn about a lot of methods. Like if somebody says, oh, don't do that because we do it like that, I'll go deep. I want to see who's doing it the best. And I'm going to immerse myself in that and really understand it. And then I'll kind of decide whether or not I'm going to really add that to my toolbox or not. If anything, it makes me go like this in how I'm training. But it has, after not quite a decade, but nearly a decade of training, given me the ability of clients that I get that have been through a few trainers or have seen a more extreme force-free trainer, or they've seen a more extreme compulsion or dominance kind of trainer. I'm like, well, I know you learned that, so I'm just going to add this, or we're just going to fine-tune that. And also, like, being involved in the sport training and learning from my mentor, not my official mentor, but who I've done a lot of learning from, who is a military trainer. He does service dogs and he also does IGP and sport and stuff. Bringing all that into it as well has really helped. But I try and be very holistic. I try and look at, even listening to Jack, the layered stress model, even though I probably don't present it exactly like that. But like auditing clients' lifestyle to see, are they contributing to frustration or lack of clarity or whatever it is, management, environmental awareness and everything. And then, like, what skills do they really, really need? Unlike Jack, though, I'm probably not as articulate and I'm not as good as really simplifying things. So I need to be careful. My ADHD gets hyperactive when I talk about dogs, and I need to be aware of that when I'm talking to clients. And I've even done coaching with Tyler Muto, actually, just on teaching. Like, I'm good at what I can do, but I need to be careful in how I teach it, because I need to be careful that I'm being clear and not just talking about stuff that I like to talk about. But I think I get better and better, but I really love tailoring and fine-tuning things and switching things and seeing those little moments with the most subtle difference, what it can do, and showing clients it doesn't have to be as complicated as they think it is. It can be the most minor adjustments.
Tell me if I'm understanding threshold manners the right way, because this like, people say dogs struggle to contextualize, but I think they can contextualize okay, and I agree with your threshold manners. And then this is how I process it in human form and then dog form. So in the human form, like, you see all these, like, if you go to a restaurant and you see like a kid, he's 10 years old, he's just throwing a fit, right? And then parents, no matter what they say, you can't get him to calm down. Well, like the threshold manner version of that is, you have to do your homework before you get to play on the iPad, right? Mm-hmm. So if you could hold that kid accountable to that simple thing within the house, then when you're going to tell him or her, mm-hmm. hey, like, come on, we're at dinner, like, put your iPad down, like, sit with mom and dad and grandpa. You don't see grandpa and grandma that often. You're more likely to have success. Will you always have success? No, but you're more likely to have success. Now, same thing in the house, don't run out the front door, when we go and get the mail, right? And we teach that you put a long leash or a leash on, you open the door, you go and get the mail, the dog makes that mistake, and you mark it with an and you say, that wasn't what I was looking for. And if you could do that in that, like, really low stress environment, now when they see that trigger out in the real world, you have that communication system, you have that rapport, and the dog kind of understands the concept of when you say and use the leash this way, kind of cut it out and go back to the previous level. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm probably viewing it slightly different to that.
Please share.
It's because I feel there's certain things you can teach which teach way beyond what you're actually trying to teach in that context, in that moment. And I find, and I think a lot of trainers are trying to find the next cool thing to teach and the next cool strategy. I actually really like getting back to basics and seeing how I can strip them down. And threshold training is one of those things where I think you can teach a lot of concepts, and it's also something a client can see in real time what a difference it makes. So what I normally do is, and this is usually dogs that are not listening, there's not a lot of clarity, like they're getting away with quite a bit, they're high arousal really fast, and they're difficult to control. And those dogs I'll often do threshold training. I'll present it as, if it's leash reactivity or just going outside or whatever it is, we want that dog to be at a level 3 out of 10 in arousal before we even leave the house. And I call it the pre-walk ritual. Like the walk starts before the walk starts. And they're like, oh, you know, they pull down the driveway a little bit and then they're fine. And I'm like, oh, no. Like they're not pulling down the driveway, and you don't go past the driveway until they're not pulling down the driveway. But forget about the driveway. We're starting at when you walk towards the cupboard and get the leash, you know, and it's all Premack. Premack, I think, is so underused and so underrated. But they're like, oh, do I need treats for this? And I'm like, no, we're going to use the next step as the reward. The next step is the reward. If your dog gets excited just because you're walking towards the leash, you stop. And they're like, do I need to tell the dog to sit? And I'm like, say nothing, do nothing, wait. And even that in itself, you can feel the energy in the room, just go, rather than sit, hey, Rex, hey, stop it, cut it out. And I'm like, just stop. And they're like, but I need to get out on the walk. And I'm like, no, you don't. This is a training session. The walk is irrelevant. And I often say to clients, how long have you got to allocate to your walk in the evening or whatever it is you're going to do? And they'll say 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And I'm like, okay, well, if you cannot even get to the cupboard to get the leash out, and that takes 30 to 40 minutes of that dog trying to regulate themselves, and you're not helping them, they have to offer you something, and just your movement, you don't even have to say anything, is going to mark that behavior and show them that they're right. And we're going on to the next step. I said, if you do that for 30 to 40 minutes, I guarantee your dog is going to be more tired than if you'd done that 30 to 40 minute walk. And I think that's always right, because you're forcing the dog to go, oh, it's not working. And then they have to go, what is it? Maybe I'll just calm down and wait and see. That's it. So then all they learn is all they have to regulate and listen. And I'm like, it's so powerful, because clients are led into this belief of it's all obedience. You got to tell the dog, sit. And I'm like, is the dog sitting? Why are you asking? Like, stop asking. And so when I do Premack thresholds, when we eventually get to the door, I'm generally not doing anything. I don't want them to ask for obedience. I don't want them to ask them to wait, nothing. And the good thing about that is, other than getting a dog to be in a lower aroused state before you even step out the door, you're teaching clients to read body language. You're teaching clients to regulate themselves, because they have to go, but I feel like I need to help. And you see it so much. They're like, hey, shh. And I'm like, stop it. And I'm pretty pleasant, and I joke around and stuff. So I can be a little pushy with clients, but I'll be like, hey, shut up. And they'll laugh, and we'll do it again, and we'll get all the angst out or whatever. But that shift, when they realize I actually don't have to do anything, but I do have to have very good timing. So I think it's a really good way to teach timing as well, that when you get to the door, I'll say have your hand on the leash, but it has to be a happy leash, which means it has to be that slack. And you cannot use the leash unless your dog rushes. You cannot use that leash. You are going to use the door. And I call it the dance of the door, because you have to have very good timing. It's like salsa. Like, if they go forward, the door closes. If they stay put, it starts to open. If they go forward, it closes. And it's really fluid. And I think in nearly a decade of training, I've had one dog where we really struggled with it, and we got to the 15-minute mark, and I was like, okay, maybe you need to do this at another time. And it was a bloody husky. But anyway, but other than that, I think dogs always get it. Why? because the reinforcer is the behavior, and all you're doing is pre-macking because they want to go outside. So like you said before about you have to stay there if you go to the letterbox, I'd probably do it different. Whereas you get to come to the letterbox and you get to have a sniff around, but you got to wait. And all I'm going to say is your release cue. And you have to figure it out. I don't care if you sit. I don't care if you offer me engagement. I don't care if you just wait, staring out the door. That's all you have to do, is just not go through the door until I say, okay. And generally, second session, third session, clients can literally be running in and out of the door. And as long as they don't say, okay, the dog just goes, nah, you're not going to trick me. You got to say, okay, you got to say, okay. And then by that time, we might use the leash if they do break. I just think it's such a great exercise to teach so much stuff, because then when you're out, or they're getting out of the car, or they're going into the park, like crossing the grass or whatever, same concept. It's just pre-mack everything. And I think pre-macking stuff in your day-to-day in the home, and I do it a lot with puppies, with structure, similar to J-Jack's like windows of opportunity and stuff like that. I'm like, activities. These are the activities your dog needs. This is the communication. This is what they have to do to earn it. And over time, they just know those rules and boundaries because you've taught it this way. And you can ease off, and you don't have to be so strict. But that way, you're always going to know how to rein it in. If you see a bit of a problem, we just need to create a bit more structure, a bit more clarity. From listening to your podcast with Jack, it's just different ways to explain things. But that's actually kind of my favorite stuff to do, is the non-training training stuff of just teaching owners how to read their dogs and how to know how to break things down and show them it's not always about treats and play and stuff. It's literally just, hey, you want to go through the door to go to the toilet? Like 5-second training session, and I don't have to say anything, or the shut up method of training. And I think it's really powerful.
2 takeaways. That was awesome, Jacqui. So 2 takeaways I had is, so pre-mac is the next step in whatever we're doing because the reward. And the second is how we get in sync. And the second one is how we get in sync without using obedience. Those were my 2 takeaways. I actually
love that you said that, because that's something I kind of wanted to cover, which I think is so important. But pre-mac, basically, for anybody that doesn't know, is we use behavior as the reinforcer rather than play or food. But the dog has to offer or do a less desirable behavior to earn access to a more desirable behavior. When I do leash walking or healing, that's why I always say it's very important to always teach a dog the end of a behavior, so that they know if I go, okay, you get to sniff, and you've got reinforcement, no food drive. That's how you teach a dog, like structured walk, which is basic balance stuff. But yeah, so I think pre-mac is so powerful. But the other thing you said was working together, because I think the perception is balance trainers or non-force free trainers, it's all about control and everything. But I think it's not. It's about collaboration. You teach them a communication system. You show dogs how to access the things they want, not through deprivation, but hey, yeah, I really want you to get that thing. It's so much fun. This is just the thing you have to do to get that. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, what if I offer you this? How do you like that? Yeah, that's good. So it's like collaboration. It's not about you must do this. No, like, just figure it out together. And I think when you have really clear, well-timed boundaries around activities, you become collaborators, and you always have this default of, if the dog doesn't know what to do, they're going to go, what should I do here? Because they know if you're not saying anything, they should just wait and look to you, and you're going to give them the solution. And I think it's collaboration. That's what it is more than anything.
I want to ask you something. So I had a call with he's a respected trainer. You could respect someone and then even be on the same balanced, whatever that. I hate the word balanced in this space.
I'm on the fence with it. I don't know how I feel about it, but anyway.
We were talking about emotional punishment, and so I'll give you the example. I think he was dealing with reactivity. So in their school was like, okay, you bark and lunge at a dog, and there's a consequence, but that consequence doesn't come from me. It just comes from your behavior. Versus for me, because I am so heavy in the collaboration, like most of what we do with the dog is like, dude, you're my best friend. Like you're everything I've ever. You're my buddy, and we're out here doing fun stuff together. Whatever fun looks like for you, or me sometimes, but like whatever fun looks like for that situation. And when you do that, not only is that rude to those people, is you're letting me down. You're letting our team down. That's not how we behave. So I have always been like, dude, you can't cut that out. Like you can't do that. So maybe there's an interrupter that comes away from me. That could be a leash pop or a e-collar. But then the remainder of the punishment event is actually emotional. And I've never actually dealt with reactivity that much. We could talk about teaching the handler, like the owners, how not to deal. But I've always had that. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
So you're advocating for that?
Yeah, I think that's such a big deal.
No, I agree with you, because at first I thought you were saying, "Oh my God, that's so terrible. You should never like," and I would call that social punishment.
Social,
emotional,
social.
It's one of those things where you get into territory, and this is where I think a lot of, I don't know, newer, maybe less educated, balanced, more on the compulsion end, but balanced trainers put a lot of stuff online, and I know that they think they're doing good, but they're showing punishment and they're showing e-collar use, and it's usually excuse my French, e-collar use or whatever, because they're like, oh, people don't see it, they need to see it. And I'm like, but you're showing them shit. You're giving the extremists ammunition. And that's kind of one of those things, because I totally understand what you're talking about, and I understand the school of thought that comes from, because my mentor is very much into that school of thought as well. But I agree with you, but I think it comes with what's the word I'm looking for? It comes with disclaimers of, you must have rapport with that dog. You must have understanding and collaboration and communication. And I think it was one of Ivan Balabanov's podcasts. I think it might have been Michael Perrone, scientist Michael Perrone, I could be wrong, talking about how the extremists will say if you use punishment, you damage your relationship. Like, that's one of the big things that they say. You'll ruin your relationship. And he talks about, if you've built a good rapport with your dog, you have classically conditioned that relationship, that it feels good to do things with you. Like, you've done a lot of classical conditioning with that. So if you're strategic and careful in how you use a punishment event like that, chances are you've got enough of a conditioning and reinforcement history there that you're going to be fine. It's kind of like yelling at your kid, like, oh, you just got to figure that out. But hey, I love you anyway. So I think when you use social punishment and in that sense, the positive punishment is kind of like the marker, right? The marker of that's the behavior we don't want. And then there's a punishment event that continues. So it's kind of like, this is really horrible. Like, oh, I must have really screwed that up, because it was when you said that thing. I think at the end of the day, as long as you know what you're doing, I would argue, for the right dog, it's one of the most powerful ways to use punishment. And
Ivan just talked about the part of rapport where there's a reconciliation stage.
100%.
So it's so counterintuitive, because when people hear punishment, they do think there's so much fallout. But in my humble opinion, I think a good punishment event brings you and the dog closer. It brings them so much closer to clarity and peace.
I agree.
And if you actually think about some of the causes of these like reactivity issues, it's uncertainty and fear. Like I am overburdened by what's happening over there. I'm alarmed. I'm caught off guard. I have this stress response. And a good punishment comes in and says, I got it. That is what I want the dog to interpret. Is like, I'll take care of this. Like, this is not a worry. If this was a worry, we'd go to battle. But it's not a worry. And I actually think it gives so much peace. And it's like, that actually strengthens a bond.
Yeah, I agree.
Versus kind of tearing it.
I agree. But it comes with all those caveats of, anybody watching this that's a new trainer is going to go, oh, I knew it was okay to bash my dog if they bark at the doorbell. And
what is bash?
Oh, bash? Oh, is that an Australian thing? Bash. Or bash.
Well, because in America, bash would be like hit him with like a towel.
No, bash is like, I'll bash you. Like, I'll pummel you. That's not what I mean.
But then that's not social.
No. I'm just talking about a punisher, like, because that's the thing. People hear what they want to hear and they will listen to misunderstand. And so they will take little things and blank out everything else we just said and go, oh, so it is okay to smash my dog for like 10 seconds. No, that's not what we said. But that's the thing. So I think there is a responsibility to say to people, you've got to know what you're doing. And you should never just try something like that unless you've worked with trainers and understand all these fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. But I 100% agree with you. I have a Malinois who's awesome, but like a lot of Malinois are, she's very sensitive. And I actually like that about her because I don't think I'd really want a forward, assertive, overly confident Malinois living in my house.
Define sensitive.
Sensitive in terms of I can go, hey, and she's like, and it's not, and she will act like I bashed her, but really she's just one of those dogs that's very sensitive to social pressure and tone that I actually don't have to use physical aversive. If there's anything, she doesn't give a shit. But if I'm like, I'm mad with you, she's like, no, like I need you to love me. She's that kind of mellow.
Didn't we like breed that? Like if you actually think about it, we bred that into dogs. Like why do we call dogs a man and woman's best friend? Is we wanted that. We wanted them to understand how we're feeling. That is part of like the equation of what we were looking for is like, hey, dude, like pick up on how I'm feeling. Like, so that's like, that is a created quality almost by us.
I can't even raise my voice on the phone and she's trying to crawl into my lap.
That's probably why you didn't like that husky, because the huskies are, when people say they're independent.
Exactly, they're the opposite. And I actually think, and I've had German Shepherds as well. It's one of the things I like about the Malinois is I find they're a little more sensitive and affectionate and smoochy, but they're just a little bit more psycho, which, you know, I mean, it's
driving, motivated.
So for her, social punishment is the most effective form of punishment. If I use a physical correction, it's really like hot or colder. She doesn't care. As long as it's clear, she's like, oh, yeah, I get you. That's what you wanted. But if I lower my voice and I growl, like she will literally crawl onto my lap and try and crawl up my jumper if she could, or sweater, whatever you call it. But I think those punishment events, and I listened to Larry and Ivan's podcast that they did recently, and everybody was like, oh my God, that was 4 hours. I listened to it all while I was driving because Larry was kind of the first person I ever really learned from. And then when I got into sport, it was Bart and Ivan and everything. So I loved their conversations. But that's what they were talking about. It's like it can be the game changer secret sauce, but you have to know what you're doing, because if some random heard about it and tried to do it, they're going to ruin a dog or get themselves or somebody else bitten. Do
you believe in that ruining the dog thing? Like in the sense of like, let me contextualize it because I did want to ask you this. Because we always like, if you use an e-collar wrong, you will ruin the dog, or if you use this wrong, you'll ruin the dog. But we know, like, and Ivan just talked about errorless learning. He used it towards dogs, but like we need to give more grace to trainers too. Like you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as, one, you're not repeating that mistake continuously, and two, you're giving a good faith effort into trying to improve.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I don't think dogs are going to get ruined like your force-free extremists would say. I'm talking more about if you've got some new trainer that's learned from some correction cowboy, and you don't even understand the fundamentals or how to fulfill a dog or motivate them, and then you throw that in the mix, but nobody's taking them forward, then you're going to have problems. But, you know, I see a lot of, my mentor's got one at the moment, a Malinois that came from, I'm not sure who the trainer was, but the dog was flat, like would not leave his side because it was afraid that he was going to get corrected, like, and wouldn't play, was just like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Like kind of thing, and wouldn't be open at all. And as much as, and I just observed the latest Napopo Gold workshop that he ran last week, and they used this dog, and seeing the subtleties of how to train a dog. And as much as that dog is so open and quite majestic in the way this dog moves, and it's just so beautiful to see after watching his journey, but you can see it doesn't take much for him to kind of go, oh, if the handling's off, because it's like there is that hardwired learning, but it means that you've just got to be a little more conscious of it, but you can absolutely bring them out of it. And I know Larry Crone shows that all the time, that you can have dogs that have been like lit up on an e-collar. You can still recondition an e-collar and train them. But so yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's not
going to be as clean as if you do it with a puppy from day
always
one
gonna
and you
be
do it
learning.
right.
So if you do the right things, the dog's going to go, oh, is it this again? So I think you've got to be conscious of that. So yeah, I understand what you meant by that for sure.
So on the topic of 4-hour combos, I don't know how Ivan does it. Like, I genuinely don't understand how you could sit for 4 hours. So I promised my audience that my podcast was going to be 75-minute max. So this is the last question I have. There was a pretty cool initiative. There was the Canine conference this last, I think it might be going on one more weekend.
It does. It has next weekend, I think.
Could you share like a little bit more about that, what you learned, and maybe a little on what you presented on?
Yeah. So I did it last year and it was a lot of fun. Obviously it was created by Jonas Black, or Punk-Ass Dog Trainer. He doesn't go by that anymore. And it's basically a virtual conference, but he knows a lot of trainers, and you just have the biggest names. Like you had Larry and Nino, and they had Maligator Mum, and I don't know if people in the States know the UK trainers, but they had Danny Wells and James Penrith. The fact that he asked me to do it was a pleasure, probably because he likes that I bitch about Zach George, but that's what I kind of did last year. This year I talked about counter conditioning protocols and kind of how they work and the evidence or lack thereof behind them and how to apply them. And the reason I did that was, again, I think everybody's trying to do the coolest new thing or have the coolest new topic. And there's trainers that talk about things that are beyond kind of my skill set. But I think sometimes it's good to just bring it back to, hey, you know that thing that everybody thinks they're doing? Well, hardly anybody's actually doing that because they don't understand what they're doing. And not to put balance trainers off, but I do think maybe on the balance training side, we don't talk about the details of those kinds of protocols and how they work and everything. And also, and this is what I said in the presentation, the evidence behind counter conditioning protocols in dog training is almost non-existent. Yet the science-based trainers will tell you it's evidence-based practice. It's not, doesn't even come close to the definition of evidence-based practice. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that the right studies haven't been done. We can observe that these things work. Technically speaking, though, and I said this in the conference, there is no evidence that counter conditioning protocols in dog training change the emotional response. There's literally not a single study that shows that. Zach will tell you there is, only because they haven't used those outcome measures. So they haven't done any cortisol measurements. They haven't done any ethnograms looking at body language and stuff like that. It's really just focused on behavior. So in a meta-analysis a couple of years ago, they actually said there's no evidence that they're actually changing the emotional response. It could be differential reinforcement, that the dog is literally just doing a different behavior to get the reward, but they're still feeling the same way about that thing.
For people who don't know, and for myself, because I'm not I don't know too much about counter conditioning. Can you give like some examples of how it works or how it doesn't?
So counter conditioning, if you think about classical conditioning, so operant conditioning is basically, if you do this, there's a consequence and you'll decide if you want to do that or not do that again. So the dog learns through voluntary behavior and what happens after they do that behavior. Classical conditioning is involuntary. You just learn things by association. It's generally how you feel about doing that behavior. So if every time a dog walks into a training center to earn treats for sitting, but they hate the room or there's a horrible noise, they'll do it for the treats, but they'll be classically conditioned to feel awful about doing that thing. Involuntary, food aversion, all those kinds of things. Counter conditioning is basically reversing that. So probably noise phobia, like thunder or fireworks, is the easiest example. They hear a firework. There's nothing really dangerous about that. But because it's a big, loud boom, and big, loud boom must mean something isn't safe, that gets paired with the fireworks. And then when they ever see fireworks or hear fireworks, they assume bad, scary, and they run away. So counter conditioning would be, in its simplest terms, every time that stimulus is present, the fireworks or the boom, something amazing happens. And over time, they realize, oh my God, that means this happens. That means this happens. That means this happens. And that's a basic counter conditioning protocol. The thing is, there's different types of protocols. There's actually operant counter conditioning protocols. And that's where you bring differential reinforcement into it, which just means a good example of that is whenever somebody comes to the door, the dog loses it because they think it's a threat and they get angry or scared and they bark, bark, bark. So if we teach a place command, and then every time the doorbell goes, we go place, and they go into place and they get a reward. That's not just giving them treats because something happens. They actually have to do a behavior to earn the treat. So that's operant and classical. More technical, harder to do, but generally more effective. The thing with counter conditioning is the more extreme end will use it for everything, not realizing that there's not emotional responses that you need or even want to change sometimes. Like general leash reactivity, you can't really counter condition that because the dog wants to get to the dog on the other side of the road and they're just really frustrated they can't get to them. So if you stop and give treats every time there's a dog on the other side of the road, you're actually building the value of seeing the dogs. And it's only going to work if the value of the treats outweigh the value of seeing that dog. And so if the dog starts looking at you and doing the behavior you want, they're not changing the emotional response. They're just doing the behavior you want for the treat because there never was fear or anxiety. But a lot of the more extreme trainers will use it for that. We're going to counter condition. We're going to change the way he feels about it. And I'm like, dog feels great about it. And in that presentation, I actually used an example of a conversation and text or comments I had with Zach George, because we were talking about e-collars, and I said, show me a method that is as effective for stopping predatory attacks without e-collars. And he said, counter conditioning and desensitization. And I'm like, which emotional response are you trying to change when a dog is predatory?
Like chasing a rabbit.
Yeah. Like, why is the dog doing that? Are they terrified of the rabbit? Is that why they're chasing the rabbit to kill it?
Fun.
I think so. They're doing it because that would feel really good. And it's not even that emotional. Like, it's a whole different region of the brain, predation to aggression. But he breaks that down. Best practice, most effective. We can generalize it from aggression. And so I use that as an example because you cannot counter condition predation. So when trainers are going out there thinking you can, you are actually, or you can be inadvertently building the value of that. You've created a behavior chain. You see that thing you really want to do and you get a treat. You see that thing you really want to do and you get a treat. What happens when you're off leash? You see that thing you really want to do. It makes you feel so good because you could get a treat, but I'm off leash. I could actually do that thing. I'm going to do that thing. So you could actually build the value of attacking an animal if you approach it that way. So that's kind of why I wanted to cover that, because I think it's often misunderstood and people think that if you just give a dog a treat when they're scared of something, or if you don't like that behavior, you're counter conditioning, and you're actually not. A lot of the time you're not counter conditioning, you're making it worse.
And this, I mean, brings everything full circle, Jacqui. You have to get really good, like your exercise at the door, you got to get really good at reading the emotion and understanding the body language of the dog. Because on the surface, maybe you could see two things and be like, hey, it's trying to chase that rabbit, or hey, it's kind of trying to get away because it's afraid. It looks maybe very similar on the surface, but the underlying emotions are so different. So kind
and
of
even the areas of the brain being used. I don't know if you have this experience, but I found some of the hardest dogs, not hardest, but difficult in terms of getting the owner to do the right training with them, are often bully breeds that have had negative experiences when they're young with dogs. So they do feel nervous around some dogs, but when they see those little fluffy dogs, that ain't nervousness. That's predatory. And you've got both things going on. And a lot of trainers will just approach that with one method. But if you use that method, you're going to make that worse. But if you use that method with that, you're going to make that worse. And I find sometimes those dogs are hard to pick But I've had a few clients like that over the years, and luckily all those clients have been really dedicated, but that can be tricky. And I also think in the wrong hands, those dogs are dangerous, because they're like, well, let's go to the vet behaviorist and we'll use counter conditioning protocols and some medication.
For the bully breeds? For the bullies?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course.
Bullies are they're powerful.
Say there's no such thing as predatory behavior in dogs because they don't need to hunt to live. And I'm like, so instinctual motor patterns aren't a thing? Like,
who said that?
Why are those dogs killing 20 sheep in one go? Honestly, it's ridiculous. Like some of the approaches. So I think, but it comes with time and experience, I think, of working with so many dogs that you can see those different things, but also know the different methods and whether they're applicable or not. So that's where assessment kind of comes into it, being able to assess.
Jacqui, you're a pleasure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I hope one of these days you'll come to the States and we get to meet in person.
I have been to. Oh, I'm going to be terrible. Oh, Miami's in Florida. I've been to Miami and I've been to the Keys. So I have been to Miami.
Did you have a good time?
In Florida. I did. I had a great time. I went in a convertible Mustang down to the Keys, just like you should. If you're there, and hung out in Miami for a while, it was awesome. That was in my young years. It was great.
Yeah, I'm an hour north of Miami.
Okay, cool.
So look, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Just like to finish up, 5-10 years from now, you're speaking to Jacqui in the future. What would you wish for her? What do you think she'd be working on? What are some of kind of your visions for your dog training career just 5-10 years from now?
I think right from the beginning, even before I began training, I was always interested in the principles and kind of the underlying debates and that kind of stuff. And as much as I love working with clients, I find more and more I love having these kinds of discussions about like concepts and theory and more like what's the evidence behind this and what do we need to look into it. I've kind of become good friends with a ethologist and trainer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, by the name of Dr. Roberto Barata. He's a Portuguese ethologist, if you've heard of him. He's one of Roger Abrante's students from the Ethology Institute, if people are familiar with Roger Abrante's. He's kind of where I'd like to be. He's a PhD. I'm never going to be a PhD. He really writes kind of about the philosophy and the paradigm of the training industry and the concepts and thoughts. And he goes deep, like some of it's quite heavy reading, but I'm kind of really interested in that, like the bigger umbrella of why are we thinking like this and how do we push past these things. So I think if anybody is interested in that side of it, if you look up Roberto Barata, he brought a book out called Anthrozoology and Animal Training, a Paradigm Shift, I think it was called. And he's just bringing out a book series now, actually. I think I was literally the first person in Australia to order his first book in the new book series. But I like that side of things, like going a bit higher in terms of how can we get this industry to a place where we're collaborating and sharing ideas rather than rejecting things. But before we do that, we really need to define things and decide this is what this is. Okay, now let's talk about that and develop it, because we can't even decide what this is yet. So yeah, if anybody's interested in that, I highly recommend Roberto Barata's stuff, because he's up there, similar to Melanie Oud, I think her name is. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, the German neuroscience who's doing really good stuff in dog training. I like that side of stuff, breaking through the BS, finding the evidence and fact checking kind of stuff. I really like doing that kind of stuff. So in 10 years, maybe I've brought out a couple of books. That'd be nice, and do some Zooms and some mentoring. I don't know.
Canine Decoded, I think, is Melanie's.
Yes, I love her.
Amazing,
like when I
follow.
got into it, hardly anybody was really deep diving into that side of things. It was a little bit lowbrow in the arguments. But Dr. Barata, Dr. Melanie, Dr. Stephanie Coddy from Black Kraken Canine, who's a welfare scientist and also a balance trainer. She's been on Ivan's podcast, I think. Dr. Sab Cohen-Hatton, who's working with James Penrith and Danny Wells. Like, there's some really good people, and and they tell us we don't know anything about qualifications and degrees. We got PhDs working with us.
Jacqui, you are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be the second on your podcast after Jack. Like, I don't think I'm really up to that standard, but I appreciate it. I said to you, it's a Jack theme.
First off, we all have something to offer. Second, comparisons to Thief of Joy. And three, this covered a lot of different topics that I think are so valuable. So
I love it. Thank you.
The benefit really from this show, I'm going to learn so much, and I enjoy these conversations. So thank you, Jacqui.
I can't wait to see the rest of them. Thank you. See ya.